All right, let's dive in. If you've ever been in charge of a project, whether it's for a university class or a full-blown construction site, you know it can feel like trying to conduct an orchestra where everyone's playing a different song. Today, we're talking about the one tool that brings harmony to all that chaos, the project schedule. This is how you go from chaos to control. So, how many times have you heard this on a project? Or maybe, just maybe, you've even said it yourself. Now, it sounds nice and flexible, right? But in the world of project management, that phrase is a recipe for absolute disaster. It's pretty much like setting sail across the ocean with no map, no compass, and zero idea where you're actually trying to go. And that's exactly why we need to start thinking of a project schedule as our navigation system. Seriously, it's not just some boring list of dates. It's the detailed, step-by-step roadmap that guides your whole team from day one all the way to a successful finish, making sure everybody is on the exact same page. So why is this navigation system so incredibly important? Well, because a really well-built schedule is way more than just a plan. It becomes your anchor. It's the tool you use for monitoring progress, for controlling what's happening, and for tracking every single moving part of the project in real time. It becomes your single source of truth. Now, this is where you can really see the power of a good schedule. Sure, it tells you when each task should happen. But what's even more important is the order of those tasks. I mean, you can't install drywall before the foundation is poured and the roof is on to keep the rain out, right? That logical sequence is everything. A schedule also shows you how to use your people and machinery wisely, and this is huge. It lets you see the ripple effect of one tiny delay across the entire project. Okay, so before you can build this powerful navigation tool, you need the right information. Think of this part as your pre-flight checklist, because a great schedule is only as accurate as the data you feed into it right from the very beginning. Let's use an example to make this crystal clear. Imagine you're managing the construction of a new campus library. Your checklist starts with the scope baseline. That's the official plan that says exactly what you're building. Then you need a super detailed activity list. And hey, here's a pro tip on that last point. Historical data. Don't just glance at the finish dates of old projects. Dig in. Find out why a similar project was late. Was it a specific contractor, a delay in getting permits? Using that kind of insight helps you build a schedule that's realistic, not just optimistic. Okay, we've got all our inputs gathered. Now for the fun part, actually building the roadmap. This whole process really boils down to 4 key steps that'll turn that pile of information into a solid, actionable plan. So here they are, the 4 big steps at a glance. It all kicks off with number 1, defining and sequencing your activities. This is where you map out the logical flow of the entire project. And you're not just making a to-do list here. You're building a network diagram. You're showing all the dependencies. You know, what has to finish before the next thing can even start. This is the absolute bedrock of a realistic schedule. Next up, for step 2, you estimate your time and resources. Early in a project, you might use a top-down estimate just to get a rough idea. But for a real detailed schedule, you've got to use a bottom-up approach, where you estimate every single task. Yeah, it's more work up front, but trust me, it's so much more accurate. And all that brings us to step 3, developing the critical path. This is probably the single most powerful concept in all of project scheduling, and it's the real key to knowing exactly where you need to focus your attention. And this slide says it all. The critical path is basically the project's backbone. It's the longest sequence of tasks that are all dependent on each other. And here's the kicker. Anything on this path has 0 float. That means 0 wiggle room. If a critical path task gets delayed by 1 day, your entire project finish date gets pushed back by 1 day. End of story. Your number 1 job as a manager is to identify this path and then protect it with everything you've got. Which leads us perfectly into our final step, number 4, review, validate, and update. I mean, knowing your critical path is pretty useless if you just print the schedule and let it collect dust. You have to get buy-in from your team, and you've got to be constantly updating it to reflect what's actually happening out in the field. A schedule is a living document. So now we know how to build the schedule, let's talk about how to avoid crashing, because knowing the common pitfalls is every bit as important as knowing the right steps. This is how you navigate around trouble before you run straight into it. Here are 2 absolute classics. First, starting interior work like drywall before the building is watertight. I mean, one big rainstorm and you could ruin weeks of work and just wreck your budget. The fix? Just respect the logical sequence you already figured out. The other big one is forgetting to schedule time for things like city inspections. These aren't suggestions, they are mandatory gates your project has to go through. You've got to build them into the schedule from day 1. And here are 2 more project killers. Double booking a critical resource, like the only crane you have on site, creates a massive bottleneck. Smart resource leveling, which is really just a fancy way of making sure key people or equipment aren't scheduled for 2 things at once, prevents this completely.
And finally, maybe the biggest mistake of all, treating the schedule like it's carved in stone. The best managers live inside their schedule. They're always updating it, stress testing it, and using it to see what's coming around the next corner.
So at the end of the day, a project schedule isn't about restricting you with some rigid plan. It's about empowering you. It gives you the foresight to plan smart so you can adapt on the fly and build even smarter. It's the fundamental difference between always being reactive and actually being in control.
And that brings us to the end. From gathering your inputs to identifying that critical path and dodging those common pitfalls, you now have the framework to succeed. So I'll leave you with this question. What's the one step you'll focus on to transform your next project schedule from just being a document into a true navigation system?